ஸோ நீங்கள் அங்கே பார்த்தீங்கன்னா மைக்கில்
சார்
பக்கத்தில் ரூபன் பேசுகிற ஒரு சார் பேசுங்க தெரியும் சார்.
ஓ
நீங்கள் பேசுகிறீங்களா?
Hi, Paneer Selvan. Hi.
how are you? Thank you for joining.
Good to see you and good to connect.
We'll start in a couple of minutes. We are just waiting.
Yeah, sure.
5:59. We'll start at 6:01.
Okay, no issues.
I think you guys can move to the front seat so that if somebody comes in, they can sit the.
There is a audience there as well.
Yes, journalism students from Asian College of Journalism.
Okay.
There is also Mr. Vijay Shankar, the former editor of Frontline. He just now stepped down. He has also come.
Okay.
We have journalism teachers here from ACJ.
Great.
This is Ruben Banerjee. We are going to discuss his book today. This is a book. Ranjit, can we start? Okay. Good evening, friends. I'm really happy and delighted to invite you for this round of the Reading Hub because it's a book that deals with media. And as a journalist, the first book I read on media also happens to be about an editor who was sacked. That was Harold Evans, and he wrote this book called Good Times, Bad Times, when he was sacked by Rupert Murdoch. He was the editor of Times and the Sunday Times, and Rupert Murdoch sacks him. And then he writes this fairly interesting book on British media. It's called Good Times, Bad Times. One element in that book stayed with me. It talks about an interaction between Prime Minister Thatcher, Rupert Murdoch, and Harold Evans. They were all at 10 Downing Street. And at 10 Downing Street, Murdoch tells Mrs. Thatcher, see this fellow, he thinks that he is running the paper. That actually captures the whole range of issues within media. That is first thing which I thought I should share. And second thing is, there's a small anecdote through which Ruben and I are connected. It's called the Outlook magazine. I was the bureau chief for Outlook when it was established in 1995. I was there till 2001 as a bureau chief for South. And in 2001, I got an offer to become an editor for the Sun Network. I called my editor, Vinod Mehta, and I told him, look, I have an offer to become an editor. What is your suggestion? He said, don't say yes, don't say no. Come to Delhi, let's talk. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I reached Delhi. And the first thing he asked me is, getting an offer as editor is very, very important offer because there are not too many editorship available. But also remember one thing, if you get sacked, you don't have another place to go immediately. Do you want to become a person who might get sacked and not able to find a place? Resolve that in your mind. I said, thank you for pointing this out because he said, a sacked editor don't find us job immediately. Then he gave me the gap between his first sacking from Sunday Observer to his last sacking at Pioneer and the gap it took for him to find us next job. That was an extremely revealing discussion we had. At that point of time, he said, any journalist who has reached a stage where he or she can be invited to become an editor should know the story of Ram Singh. I said, what is the story of Ram Singh? He said, story of Ram Singh was the one which Kushwant Singh shared with Vinod Mehta. Kushwant Singh was then the editor of Hindustan Times. Ram Singh was a person who used to bring tea for the editor's office. And one afternoon, when Kushwant Singh reached HT office around 2:30 in the afternoon, Ram Singh was completely sloshed. Therefore, Kushwant Singh called him and said, why are you getting sloshed by 2:30? Can't you wait at least till 6? Ram Singh got angry and he turned around and said, sir, editors come, editors go, Ram Singh permanent. And he proved to be extremely prescient because that night, Kushwant Singh lost his job. Ram Singh stayed to be the office boy for the editor's office for 3 more editors. Vinod Mehta always says, remember Ram Singh. I thought that this fairly lengthy background is important because today we are talking about the state of media in a situation where the pressures are multiple. There's a pressure of not able to find a right revenue model. There's a pressure due to the digital disturbances. There are pressure due to political interferences. But none of these pressures are really new because media negotiated multiple pressures over a period of time. And editors did stand up and try to hold people in power to account. With this short introduction for young journalism students here, I thought I should open up. Before getting into Ruben's book on editor missing, I would like to ask Ruben's personal history as a reporter and as a journal editor. What is that journey? How did he, from a reporter, he become an editor? Ruben, that will be of interest. And you started from Calcutta, you moved to Hyderabad. From Hyderabad, you moved to Bhubaneswar, and then you moved to Delhi as editor. But we would like to have a short idea about your personal journey before we get into the book.
Yeah, thanks, Pani. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. And thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me. Well, to give a short recap of what my journey has been in journalism, well, I was kind of interested. I got drawn into journalism very early in my life. Like I was still in school when I met someone who happened to be a reporter. I got very impressed to be very honest, with the kind of clout he had. So I found it very exciting, but I didn't know how to go about it because apart from the newspaper hawker who used to deliver the paper to our house every morning, we knew our family had no connections with the media. So my journey wasn't very easy. Like somehow at that age, I had that idea that if I can get a press card which says, the card says reporter, then I made it as a journalist. So I was stupid enough at that point of time. The very first time I went looking for a job with somebody's recommendation, a very small newspaper, the chief reporter, someone said, well, I know this chief reporter, go and meet him. See, at that age and time, whether it was Bengali, English, Hindi, or small or big, it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be a reporter. So I go and meet that chief reporter, and I recount that in my book, that episode. Slightly hilarious. He gave me a kettle and said, get me tea. So I got him tea. Then I poured him a glass of tea. He had the tea and says, okay, now you come back after 6 months. So that is how my journey started. I was fortunate enough at that point of time, shortly after I started freelancing, got my articles were rejected by almost everyone for about a year or so. Then I got my first job, a break, because Ramoji Rao, Inadu, he launched an English daily called News Time. Sadly, it's folded up now. It doesn't exist anymore. So News Time gave us the platform. So I came over to Hyderabad, started my journey. Within a year, I found myself at Indian Express Hyderabad. Indian Express Hyderabad, I did well. Then they posted me as the Orissa correspondent of Indian Express of all centers, multi-editions. Like, so you're the single person in the only man for the entire chain of paper in the state. So that was kind of a definitely a great fillip to my career. And that is when I joined. After a while, I joined India Today in Orissa. After a while, I was shifted to Calcutta, tasked with the this entire territory of Bengal, Orissa, Northeast, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan. So we were state reporters. I went back to Orissa again after a couple of years. I became as India Today, I was posted back in Orissa. When this rare opportunity came to go abroad and work with Al Jazeera in Doha. So I spent 12 years in Doha. And that really opened up the world for me. My perspective widened. Great experience. People from all nationalities were there. I used to call the Al Jazeera newsroom mini United Nations. So that really opened the world to me. 2015, mid 2015, I came back. I didn't really, after being away for 12 years, I didn't have much hope, but then fortunate, I was lucky enough. I became the national affairs editor of Hindustan Times in Delhi. And my job was to run the national news network. I had about 104 reporters across the country. And then we had multiple editions and all. So 2.5 years there. And then a brief spell of unemployment because I walked out of my HT job because something happened, which I detail in my book. Again, 4 or 5 months I was unemployed. Again, lucky enough to be hired as the editor of Outlook. So I spent 3 years, 3 months in Outlook precisely. The first 3 years, as I say in my book, I had a fantastic run. I enjoyed greatly. There was zero interference. The next 3 months, everything went wrong. And again, I am unemployed. So that has been my life journey in a nutshell, Paneer.
What are the lessons you learned as a reporter you brought in when you became an editor?
I think that has my reporting days, my reporting experience has always given me that cutting edge. One, a reporter can't take me for a ride because even when we were reporters, we would lie to our bosses and get away with murder. We'll spin stories. A reporter can't lie to me because whatever lie he tells me, I have resorted to the same lies possibly 30 years ago. So I know the tricks of the trade. So it's very difficult for a reporter to fool an editor like me who has had a very solid reporting background. And that is what I used to tell my Outlook reporters also, of course, in lighter vein, that you can't fool me because the way you're trying to fool me, I fooled my bosses 20, 30 years ago. So I can give you very funny anecdotes. And maybe this is the good occasion, like if you can bear with me for 2 minutes. We were very naughty, right? So I remember when I was the Orissa correspondent of India Today, and Arun Puri, is the owner editor of India Today. So, and those were the days when we had landlines. So no mobile, of course. And afternoon, after lunch, I was having a siesta, which I was not supposed to because I was working. I was supposed to be out and about. My phone rang. The guy, so I was sleeping, half asleep. I picked up the phone and said, "Who is this?" He said, "Arun." I said, "This is not the time to call me." And I banged on the phone. Again, the gentleman called. Again, he says, "Arun." And I am thinking that it's my friend Arun in Bangalore. Again, I banged the phone down. And the third time he says, "It's Arun Puri." So that's the time when it hit me, the seriousness of it. So I called, "Oh, yes, Mr. Puri, sorry." And then Arun asks me, "You are sleeping? India Today reporter is sleeping now." So I'll have to spin a story. What do I tell him? It was midsummer and I could see out of the window. The sun was beating down and even the tar on the road had melted. So it was that hot. But I had to tell him something. So I told him, "Mr. Puri, what do I tell you? It's raining so heavily in Bhubaneswar. Not cats and dogs, it's raining cows and buffaloes." And Mr. Puri said, "Oh, really?" So that is how we were as reporters. So reporters always has this streak of pulling a fast one. So that really helped because I could catch my reporters, catch all the, like when they are trying to fool me. And also I always saw journalism from the ground. So I wasn't really much into academics and theory. Stories from the ground really impacted more, influenced me more. So I was kind of very rooted given my background. I continued to be rooted, and that really helped me. I think that was that when I look back as my reporting days, I think that is where my journalism, that is something which really immensely enriched me.
Ruben, one of the journalism teacher used to tell us that journalism travels on two tracks. One is bearing witness, another one is making sense. And making sense comes in the form of your edit writing, your data interpretation, number crunching. But bearing witness is the one which connects a particular media with the reader or a viewer in an intimate manner. It gives an organic relationship between a media outlet and the consumer of the news. And this bearing witness comes from the role of the reporters. What do you see the biggest pressure on bearing witness today? Because we are seeing a massive cost cutting on the news gathering expenditure. How do you look at this massive cost cutting on news gathering expenditure and this element of bearing witness?
Yeah, because journalism, as journalists, we are,
Makes compensate for this loss.
yeah, I agree with you because journalism is all about storytelling. Like we see something as you say, rightly say, bearing witness, and then tell the story as effectively and truthfully as possible. But then at the same time, I realize that media in India is under siege. And it's when I say that it's under siege, it's just not pressures from outside or the government or political parties or politicians. Even internally, we are under siege. And the business model of Indian media is kind of broken. So, and it's a complex issue. There are many sides to the story. But uh, in short, what I can tell you is the ownership structure of Indian media is pretty vulnerable. And alongside, media has stopped making money. It's no more a profitable or money, revenues are not easy. So you are under pressure. So what do you do? Even as an editor of Outlook, I had to sack people. Like that's something very unfortunate. But there are certain things, if you need to stay afloat, you are desperate to stay afloat, keep the organization alive. So you will have to wield the knife. It's very sad and unfortunate. But that's the kind of immense pressure we were under. Like even in Outlook, like as I detail in my book, there was a time during the pandemic that we couldn't pay salaries for 5 months. So if you are unable to pay salaries and people's lives depend on their salaries, children go to school, milk comes to home. When you can't pay salaries, obviously you are cutting corners. You are not sending reporters out on assignments. You are not sending out photographers. And that is also happening across the board, even in you see it on television. Why these debates, endless debates every night? Because television channels have cut down on news gathering expenses. To send out a reporter, a cameraman, it takes a lot of money. But to get 4 people and have a debate and fight, that doesn't cost much. And they are filling up that airtime. So it's impacting us very badly in various ways. It's unfortunate, but then that's how the Indian media is. And cost cutting is a very harsh reality. Is there a solution? And the problem that we face now is very complex. If you ask me for a solution, there is no single magic bullet. But then I think we'll have to still figure our way out. We'll have to keep experimenting and then figure our way out, like what the best that one can do.
See, one of the elements which came up earlier is when the Western media was facing its crisis, INS and even the Editors Guild were smug. That is around 2005, 2006, when the Western media crisis became apparent. In fact, we had a then chairman of the INS used to say that sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. So in the media case, it's a rising here and it's setting in the west. And that was also the time when our numbers were going up. And it was actually 15 years after liberalization. And there was a peak profitability across the platforms, whether it was broadcast or print. From where did our newspaper owners and editors have that misconception that India's trajectory might be different from that of the West? Because if we had woken up to that reality at that point of time, probably would have gained about 7 or 8 years to make certain internal adjustments. And we may not have seen the type of brutal bloodbath which we witnessed around 2014, 2018.
The bloodbath still continues till date.
It started then.
Yeah.
That at least we could have delayed it and we could have even reduced the quantum of the bloodbath.
I really don't know because the market is bad right now, right? And given the economic downturn or whatever you might say, and this whole new lot of media platforms coming up. So traditional media has been very badly hit because they are now out to compete with the others. So the ad pie, the revenue, the size of the pie hasn't really expanded, but the number of claimants to that pie have multiplied several folds. And in any case, 80 to 90% of that advertisement pie, whatever you make, is taken away by the tech giants like Google and Facebook. So you are left to fight over the balance, the rest 10% or 20% of it. So how do you make do with the so little? And that is where the problem of Indian media lies, because one, as I keep saying, it's a very complex problem. One, the ownership structure itself makes us very vulnerable, because most of them are businessmen. Media people who own media houses are also into other businesses, and that makes them vulnerable, because if they hold the mirror to the government tomorrow can go after them and fix them. So they are scared. So that is one reason why most of the owners of traditional media, barring a few honorable exceptions, have less and less appetite for standing up to the government now. Such a situation existed even earlier during emergency and other times, but it's become more acute, pronounced now. That's a fact of life. Simultaneously, there is not enough money to cover the costs. So what do? So it sets off a vicious cycle. You sensationalize because you hope that it will get you additional viewers or eyeballs or readers, and you will be in a better position to get ads. But then so basically you are compromising on news or journalism to try and get ads. And who is your advertiser? The biggest advertiser still remains the government. And so if the government is paying you, feeding you, then it also has the ability to twist your arm. And that is exactly what is happening. So we are under siege from various sides. So how you get out of this? It will require a lot of, I would say, a lot of ingenuity, enterprise, smartness. But honestly, we are in a kind of a very tight spot.
See, in this grand old dichotomy between media management and the editorial control, always the blame is being laid on the people in the editorial. But the people on the media management had never come up with anything which is innovative to negotiate with any of the technological changes.
You are right, because media, the management, whichever organization it might be, they see editorial as cost, quote unquote cost. We are apparently cost for them, right? So that's very sad, really. We are the core of the industry, and those guys see us as cost. So my job is gone. For them, it's one cost gone, saved. So it's pretty sad, pretty disappointing. And I haven't, see, I hear all these, like wherever I go, I hear a lot of all these management guys talking. Maybe they are more informed and better educated than me. They definitely have better qualifications than me. But I've never, I don't know, like nobody has been able to give me a kind of a solution so far. Like they give you plans. Yes, you ask them, they will give you plans. But whether those plans work or not, I don't know. I haven't seen. Like I had been, as the editor of Outlook, my first primary task was to save that organization, which was under tremendous financial stress. So which meant that I was absolutely aligned with my management, absolutely aligned. If they wanted to, if they had any opportunity of making money, I would help them to make money without compromising on my journalistic principles or ethics. But I was aligned. I never stood in their way of bringing in additional revenue. In fact, as a matter of fact, I went out of my way to help them to make more money. Like we in Outlook last year or a year and a half before, we were the pioneers in India, perhaps. Like you have subscriptions, annual subscriptions, monthly subscriptions. We in Outlook started pay-per-use, micropayment for, you can go in rather than paying for taking up a whole year subscription or a 6-month subscription. You are interested in a story which is behind a paywall. You click on that story, pay 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupees, whatever the story is priced at, and you can read that story. You actually, like a Paytm, you can have a wallet. You can charge your wallet and keep reading stories across magazines and newspapers platforms. So which I thought that was a very novel idea. And I actually helmed it, initiated it. I got those guys into our organization saying that let's do this, because that might open up a additional revenue stream which we never had. Whether that, and I still believe finally readers in India will have to start paying for news that they read. It cannot be free. Otherwise, journalism doesn't survive. Journalism doesn't happen free. So going back to my point, like I was aligned and the management had an ally in me, but finally nothing helped, because I guess the finances never helped. They came under pressure, and the immediate casualty was me. The cost, I had to go.
See, taking up this question, starting from TN9 and revolutionizing business newspapers in late 80s and early 90s, to the graded paywall, what you introduced in Outlook later. As a person who's been in journalism from 1984, I've seen that most of the innovations have come from editors. I was the longest serving reader's editor of the Hindu, and that idea came from N. Ram, again an editor. Therefore, Nainen or Ram or Vinod Mehta or to even Ruben there, it's editors who have brought in certain amount of innovations, but the managers who are supposed to provide the stability seem to just discover one reason or another reason by shifting their goalpost rather than generating a necessary viable revenue model. Do you think that this has brought in additional pressure on the editors?
Of course it has, because see, at the end of the day, if you're an editor, you're responsible for your staff, your colleagues. And who do they come to? Like when their salaries are not paid on time, or salaries are not paid for 5 months. I have had instances where one of my staff has got thrown out of her house because she couldn't pay rent. The landlord came and just threw her out. And so who does she call at that hour? She calls her editor, right? So you are under tremendous, tremendous pressure because you are responsible to all these people. And I, while in Outlook, I used to dread the beginning of the first 2-3 weeks of every month, because I knew salaries will not come and people will start calling me. When do I get my salary? I have to pay my school child's fees. I have a medical emergency at home. And I used to really dread. So apart from doing my journalistic work, I used to break my head over when do people get salaries? How do they get salaries? So, and I would do my best within my means, within my whatever my ethics and beliefs permitted me, to enable the management to make money. But sadly, at the end of the day, you are right, Mr. Paniselvan. It doesn't matter. Like editors are disposable commodity because the management doesn't believe in scruples. So generally, they are out there fending for themselves. So I shouldn't run down any other vertical. As I said, they are better educated, more qualified than me. But then there cannot be any journalism or media without journalists, and then that they must realize. But then that's not happening. But then I think the trend has also been set kind of by Times of India, the world's largest newspaper, and definitely India's biggest. The proprietor there said that I don't deal in newspapers, I'm dealing in advertisements, right? He said so. So if that be the idea, then I think we are fighting a very difficult battle.
Before moving to your book, you have been part of that initial Al Jazeera's foray into the digital journalism. At that point of time, digital journalism was seen as a great enabler. But today we are looking digital journalism as a idea of ceding control to the state, because state can actually switch off the access to internet. We saw it happening in Jharkhand. We saw it happening in Jammu and Kashmir after the abrogation of the Article 370. If we are moving to digital, and if the digital can be controlled by the state, what is the way to confront this? Are we moving from a multinodal journalism towards a highly centralized form in the new digital era?
No, I don't. No, but then online, the digital journalism is inevitable, and there is no way that we can deny it, because the younger generations, like people like you and me, are now passe. Like people, younger generations, I'm 100% sure the students who are sitting there with you, they would be consuming news on their tablets or mobile phones or whatever. They are not holding a physical newspaper or a magazine anymore. So that is how the needs of the younger generation have changed, and we'll have to keep pace with that. And if you ask me, I'll tell you that more than the traditional news media that we knew of in India, but for one or two exceptions, I think the real journalism, the brave, courageous, feisty journalism has been done at the moment in India by online journalists and online platforms, because the traditional media is more or less capitulated and have gone quiet, except for one or two. I can name them, very few exceptions. But then the journalism, I think these journalists who are doing it, the online platforms. I'm very, very hopeful. I'm very impressed. News Minute, News Laundry. My friend Samar Halrankar runs that Article 14 Wire. I may or may not fully agree with the kind of journalism that they do, but they are very honest and feisty. And that is where I think journalism in India will they will have to shoulder the burden of Indian journalism going forward. Now, whether the government will be able to switch off internet, we'll have to push back and we'll have to fight it out. So there has to be a pushback. I think India, all said and done, like however strong that government might be, there will be the civil society will push back. And this fight will be fought in the right, fought very valiantly. And there will be internet freedom, online freedom. So I think there is already these internet online platforms have formed a collective, and they have gone to the court, they have moved the court, they are fighting that. So obviously there will be a pushback from us. But then I don't think we can dispute or kind of discount the role that digital journalism will play in this country, because habits have changed. It's no more our generation, it's a younger generation. And
See, the only problem is digital archiving costs more money. And there is very little investment which is coming there. For instance, now if a young researcher wants to know about the hate tracker, which you have mentioned in your book, which happened in Hindustan Times, we don't actually have access to that. That's where the lack of digital archiving or enough investments on digital archiving also makes it vulnerable to the type of pressures what you are witnessing. What is your thought on that?
see, advertisement revenue is shifting to digital, right? I exactly can't recollect. I have mentioned them in my book. I think digital revenue is growing in a much faster pace than print advertisement. So as money flows in, I think there will be greater investments. And see, whether we are investing, whether we are archiving, I'm sure big organizations like Hindu and Times of India must be archiving their digital content, because they have more money to play with. India Today, of course, they will be like, I think their archive is very solid. For me, more than anything else, whether it is being archived or what, I think the spirit of India journalism, that is what we should be fighting for and protecting to the best of our ability. If the spirit dies, no amount of investment can let you survive. And that is, the journalism is at the core is under siege.
Now that you come to this idea of siege, let's start talking about your famous cover story, Missing. You have explained it very well in the book, but for the sake of some of the readers, could you tell us how you decided to go about that story? Because I have two questions there. I'll come to it later, but we'll start about how you decided to go ahead with this cover story called Missing.
See, I'll tell you very honestly, that was the second, at the peak of the COVID second wave, sometime last May. That was the time, and Delhi was very badly affected, and the rest of the country also was. But Delhi was terrible, terrible, because people were dying in parking lots, cars, ambulances. There was no oxygen, no hospital beds. Even my family had COVID. Fortunately, our oxygen levels were stable. If the oxygen levels had fallen, even I would have died for want of oxygen. And I would have kind of surfaced in some crematorium as an unknown body or unclaimed body. And that was happening. And so we were very concerned. So I decided that we must have a hardcover, because as I said in my book, the previous week, Outlook, India Today, our great rival, had a very strong issue. They on the cover, they said the failed state. So it was a pretty strong statement to make. They said India is a failed state. So we were about to go with a soft cover story for the next week. I said no. So I called for an emergency meeting. I said, we'll go with a very strong cover this time, and we will tackle this. And then we reached out to our, so more or less that night itself, we decided on who the columnists will be. So we reached out to people like Pratap Banu Mehta, Shashi Tharoor, Mahua Moitro. So the columns started coming in, and generally we were kind of convinced that the government has let us down very badly at that height of. So we were doing a critique of the government, and media holds the mirror to the powers that be. So we said, like, the government has failed, so we will call it out this time in this issue. Though I believe in all sides journalism, so even we had BJP people writing in that issue, because their side of the story also had to be told. But to be very honest, the idea of missing had still not hit us. We had not come to that stage. We thought about it only a day or 2 days in advance. I think our magazine used to go to print on Wednesdays. So around Sunday evening, 3, 4 of our editors started and our art director started discussing like what we should be doing. And then one of my deputies came up with this idea, like, hey, listen, we are trying to say that the government has not been there. So why don't we make it look like a police missing poster? When somebody goes missing, the police does a poster now with his photograph missing. So we thought that that was a great idea. And we all agreed, we all jumped. We said, yeah, let's try it out. So our art director got down to work. He came up with this. I thought it was a fantastic cover. It only had missing. At the bottom of it, 3 staccato lines, name, Government of India, age 7 years. Modi government was 7 years old then. And informed citizens of India. Later on, when this cover hit the stands, it became super viral. People were changing their WhatsApp profile pictures into this cover, Facebook pictures into this cover. It became super viral and it became a talk of the town. Later on, I know that there was this political party which had press conferences that said that it's part of a Congress toolkit. And that allegation included that apparently the Congress party had directed the magazines to use the word missing. I can tell you, apart from these 3, 4 of our editors who were discussing and kind of brainstorming what the cover should be, it was our idea and nobody else outside it, nobody was involved. What Congress hates of stupidity. One of my deputies came up with that idea. My art director translated it into action and I okayed it. I said, yeah, it's a great idea. So we went ahead with it. So that was the whole idea. Like we decided that we must, because I was convinced that staying quiet at that point of time, when people were dying, would mean that I had failed as a journalist and an editor, because we are supposed to speak truth to power. And staying quiet would have meant being complicit in the mass deaths. We had to speak out and we spoke up. That is what happened. The consequences of it were, caused me a lot of grief in the months to come.
See, one thing which you have been saying is that you wanted to have both sides. But unfortunately, sometimes the other side may not have the truth, but it might have the heft of the power. Isn't it a responsibility of us as journalists to do an act of verification rather than giving them the space? Don't you think that we enabled some of them to gain the present political heft because we were under this idea of giving them the space? And here I would like to invoke the idea of John Rawls' idea of justice. In John Rawls' idea of justice, he says that intolerant sect cannot invoke the idea of toleration to gain space. Gaining space and sharing space and all these things are meant for the tolerant sect. The way intolerant sect cannot invoke the idea of the tolerant section to gain space to spread intolerance, which will go against the spirit of justice. When I read this in 89, I didn't really understood its full import. But much later, looking at the gravitas gained by these people, where we have permitted them to have the space, we have permitted intolerant sect to gain space by we being tolerant and not subjecting their fact to a rigorous fact check.
Yeah.
How do you look at that?
Yeah. So I still have, I fully agree with what you are saying, and that's a serious problem. And I'm on the same page with you. But I have always been a firm believer in both sides, all sides journalism, and I still hold that because otherwise, say suppose, if we don't do all sides journalism, we run the risk of censorship. There is already this culture, cancel culture. Like I cancel you out and you cancel me out because what I tell you is not convenient to you and what you tell me is not convenient to me. So we are canceling each other out. And that amounts to censorship. And I also have a basic question, like who decides what is truth and what is a lie? And we have had very interesting conversations around this. Even in Outlook, we have done cover stories. But my belief has been like, give representation, representation to all sides, all shades of opinion. But my thumb rule has always been, any opinion is fine with me, both sides, as long as it does not incite violence or it is brazenly abusive, right? If somebody is calling for killing someone or murdering, I will not give it that kind of representation, of course. But otherwise, as an editor, I would like to believe, present both sides of the story to your reader, one, and then also write, and nothing stops you from taking an editorial stand and say, well, I published both sides of the story, but I as an editor or as the part of the organization think that this is right and that is wrong. And then let the reader come to his own conclusions. That way you have not cheated the reader. Actually, you have served him better by giving him all sides of the story and allowing him to make a informed choice, a decision, arrive at a better decision, rather than dumbing down. So I still stick to this, like, yes, with those two thumb rules in place, I think it works and it served me well so far.
So how much of this accommodation has this idea of act of verification? Because another element of journalism is act of verification. And if we use this yardstick of act of verification, some of these columns have no place to find space in the public sphere because it is either bigotry or malice. Bigotry and malice masquerading as opinion is the one which we are seeing happening quite often. Are we going to refrain from act of verification when it comes to opinion?
See, earlier, like I don't remember fact checking being the in thing when we were growing up as journalists in 80s and 90s. Did you know of, were we aware of fact checking or fact checkers? I can't recollect, right? So that's a way of life, and it's something very positive that has happened. So if, say, a legitimate politician or a official has written an opinion, as again I said, like, unless as long as it is not open incitement to violence and abusive, I will carry that opinion. And if it lends itself to a fact check, I'll do that fact check and expose that also, the other side of the story. I think that's the best way to call their bluff, rather than censoring them, canceling them. Show them up the way they are, rather than censoring them.
See, for instance, in the missing issue also, you had the column by the BJP person. Did that provide any sort of defense for you later, or it did provide any sort of a protective ring?
No, it did not. It did not. But then we will see, we will keep doing things what we think is proper and ethical. Whether it helps, it doesn't help. Finally, my journalism did not help me, right? Or my beliefs never came to my rescue. I still was sacked. But then I'm not going to give up on my convictions, right, Paniselvan? I'll keep doing the way I think it's proper and right. And actually, come to think of it, I had only one BJP guy because writing in that issue. I wish I had got more BJP guys to write in that issue, because on the other side, I had Moa Moitro, Shashi Tharoor, I had Pratap Bhanu Mehta. I wish I had more BJP guys writing. I may not have agreed. Of course, I wouldn't have agreed at that point of time. There was no way that the government was not missing, whatever the BJP guys might say. But I would still have liked to give them greater representation. I don't mind that. And then stick to my stand. I think that particular issue, the editorial I wrote, was one of the most kind of very strong, exceptionally strong editorial that I wrote. And very unfortunately, it's very ironical. I was kind of losing my job 2 months after that. And I was primarily losing my job because I thought that I've been bracketed as anti-government, anti-Modi. But that particular week, I was trying to get a opinion piece from Mohan Bhagavat of RSS. I wanted to give him a platform. I said, why not? Because that issue was supposed to be that Independence Day issue of Outlook, where we were thinking of celebrating the idea of India. And RSS, I may agree, I may not disagree, but it's a legitimate organization now. It's no more a banned organization. And they have every right, I think, to get to speak their mind. And I wanted to hear what Mohan Bhagwatji's idea of India was or is. And yes, I could have balanced it with somebody else who viscerally disagrees with RSS. That would have made it even better. And possibly that is what I would have done if I had stayed in my job. But I think, see, hate cannot be met with hate. Hate has to be met with reason. And to have reason, you have to have a debate, a discussion. And how do you get the media in India today has become very polarized. I keep saying this. You got to have some moderation. You got to have a dialogue. Otherwise, if you are holding on to your own strident positions, you are just preaching to your own choir. Nobody else is getting converted into your belief or whatever you think.
This leads to another interesting question called the news silos. And within this polarized arrangement, each one is a silos, and these silos is a self-contained, and there's a little interaction. Whereas with the old analog structure, whether you like it or not, everything else your eye has to scan through it. Whereas in the way the artificial intelligence operates, it picks whatever you like, and it also pushes certain things what you don't like, because that's how the AI works with algorithms. And another element of this digital journalism is that how can we overcome the inherent biases of algorithms? Since you are talking about polarization, because the maximum polarization, as it was clearly established in the Trump's election, where the data shows very clearly that polarization was aided by technology. And how do you think, what are the tools we have to give the readers to overcome the technological?
And unfortunately, most of the tech joints are headed by Indians. So we are the villains, right? Well, that's very true, because the algorithms are loaded against us. And I don't think anybody has been able to kind of crack how Google works, because they keep changing the goalpost every 10 days or 15 days. Like, you ask your tech guys in the office, like, why isn't my story being picked up? Because in that 1 week, the past 1 week, the Google would have silently changed their algorithm. So they keep doing that. So I'm not a tech guy. I really don't know how to answer this. For me, the antidote would be keep pressing, doing whatever you want to do, with full conviction, and then nothing can stop you. If you can come up with an issue like missing, irrespective of the algorithms or whatever, or the government not liking it, it will still go super viral. Nothing can stop me. It did. People talk about that print media is dead, magazine has lost its relevance. My missing issue is a proof that how super viral a magazine can become, provided you have the right content. We proved it. So I think there is a huge positive in that. You can beat all the algorithms.
How did this journey from government missing to editor missing happen?
Well, it took about 2 months, 2 months or 2.5 months. As I said, I had a great run the first 3 years. The management, the owners were absolutely non-interfering, and which I say that in my book, that I considered myself in the first 3 years of my stint as Outlook editor as the most free editor in the country, perhaps. And then missing happened. So we came under pressure. We were told in that many words. I got calls from my editor owners. I got calls from my CEO saying that they are under tremendous pressure that they can't withstand. I understood their problem. We said, okay, theek hai. And then next week onwards, we charted a different course, because I also, as an editor, like you, navigate and try and cool down temperatures. So 2 months, unfortunately, what happened was Stan Swami, the tribal activist, died in custody. And we had to do because that was a big story for us. And we, using Stan Swami's death in custody, we looked at how terror laws are being misused in the country. So we did a cover on that. And at around the same time, Pegasus snooping happened. And now you can't ignore Pegasus. Yeah, it goes against the government, the party in power. They were the ones, the accusation was they were the ones who were snooping. But as the topical magazine, editor of a topical magazine, you can't ignore Pegasus, right? So we did a major story on Pegasus. That point of time, the owners, the management put their foot down and said, you can't do this kind of stories. You can't do terror laws. You can't do Pegasus. And then I realized that I have now hit a kind of a wall. And I insisted on getting a clarification, a clarity, like what can we do and what we can't do. And obviously they did not want to give me a clarity. Instead, what they did was they started interfering and undercutting and undermining me in my work, to the extent that they send me emails saying that these are the reporters you have to sack. So they were kind of making my stay in Outlook very, very uncomfortable. They possibly thought that they will be able to, that I should resign and go. And because they just simply didn't want this kind of content to be done, these kind of stories to be done. And so being undercut and undermined, obviously I was very upset. Then one fine day I had enough. I said, I'm going on leave for a month and I'm entitled to go on leave, right? So I told them that day after tomorrow, they gave 36 hours notice that I'll go on leave. I went on leave. My CEO, because the moment I went on leave, there was speculation in the media because the missing cover, people knew about it. So they easy going on leave because of the missing cover. So there was speculation. And my CEO told the reporters, and he has been quoted, saying that, no, Ruben, nothing to do with missing. Ruben is going to come back. I have approved his leave. He claimed that he has approved my leave. 1 month later, when I came back, I reported for duty because I went on a month's leave, which I extended by 3 days because towards the end, I was not well, I had fever. I came back. I was sacked within 2 hours of rejoining, within 2 hours. And the same CEO who had said that he has approved my leave took the plea that I have gone on leave, unbefitting leave, and that is why he sacked me. So something which he himself had claimed that he has approved. A month later, he was sacking me for that. And very interestingly, that in that intervening 2 years, so the moment I came back, the first thing I did was I told my editorial team that was the time when Yogi Adityanath, it was before the elections, right? 6 months or 7 months before the UP elections. So Yogi Adityanath, they was talking about Abba Jan and all that. So there was a lot of communal dog whistling happening. So for the next week, I told my team that let's do a cover story on this, how communally divisive these UP elections will be and where will it head. And I thought that that was a very legitimate story to do because at that point of time, the headlines were on Yogi Adityanath and Abbajan, and that whatever he said about these rations being kind of monopolized by 20% or 80%, whatever he was talking about. Incidentally, it so happened that Yogi Adityanath was one of the biggest advertisers of Outlook. Like he was giving, in the run up to the elections, there was an advertisement bonanza, and we were making about 75 lakhs a month. So I suggested the study, and within 2 hours I was sacked. So from a paper tiger, I became a toothless paper tiger.
In this environment, who are the people who came to your defense at that point of time?
No one. No one. I didn't expect anyone also. See, I used to be very, very proud of my Outlook team. I think we had a fantastic team. And if you ask me what my biggest achievement as the Outlook editor was, even at the height of such financial stress that we were undergoing, my biggest success was I could keep my core team together. There was very few resignations, no attrition at all. Okay, so I could keep the team, though people were not getting their salaries, 5 months, 4 months, people still loved coming to work and they enjoyed doing what they did. And that, I think, the kind of work environment I ensured or gave was my biggest achievement. If you ask me honestly what my achievement is, that's my achievement. Otherwise, that organization should have, the team should have disintegrated. You don't pay salaries for 5 months, no team will stay. Okay, it's very unusual. Yes, when I was sacked, of course, my team was very, very kind of outraged, but they couldn't do anything, and I didn't expect them to do anything, because after all, their livelihoods are like, they need to have a salary. They can't walk on their job just like that. They can't quit jobs overnight. They had to make secure other alternative jobs before they could do anything. So all of them called me. They met me. They came to my came home. They sympathized with me, but I never expected them to, because we never had a trade union, and I'm not a union leader. I was not leading an agitation or anything. So it was my pain, which I decided that I must take myself. But yes, what has happened is, I think my sacking went down very badly with the team, and you can check this out. 99% of that team has left now. That Outlook team has left. The team has disintegrated. Now they can give any spin. They do. The management will try and give it a spin that they got rid of people, this and that. They might say all that. But the fact of the matter is, we had very good people, and 99% of them have left Outlook. So
we have been discussing for an hour. Now I think we should open it up for the floor. Identify your name before you're asking the question, please.
Any questions?
Any question? Yeah.
Hello? Okay.
Please.
Hi, sir. My name is Anusha. I'm from Kerala. So, sir, you mentioned about editors feeling dreadful at month ends and month beginnings as they are responsible for their staffs, and there is a big salary issue going on in this field. So, I only have a very short experience of 2 years in this field, but I have struggled during month ends and month beginnings because my boss, who was also the chief editor of a television news channel, was struggling to give me my 9,000 rupees salary. So all of us who continued to stay in that organization stayed out of passion. So I get mocked by my family saying that I should leave this career and go for some daily wages job. So why is it happening to journalist organizations with pure intentions? Like, why can't, like, what is this big salary issue going on in this field?
yeah, as I told you, like there is very little money to be made, because the economic downturn has meant that companies are cutting down on their costs, and the first thing that they cut always is advertisement. So now, so the advertisements are not there readily available in the market, And then whatever ads come, it's mostly the government. And then 80-90% of it is taken away by Google and Facebook, the way it is structured now. So that is piling up a lot of pressure because the news organizations are not making the kind of money that they were supposed to make. So that is, and within, and in the, say, the Indian media scene, maybe a few organizations like the behemoths like Times of India possibly would be doing well, or maybe India Today is doing well, I don't know. But then the rest of us, a majority of us are struggling. And I appreciate your passion that you continued. But then the point is, not everyone is as lucky as you or me. Like when you have families, when you have children going to school, when you have a medical emergency, what do? Your passion doesn't cover up your emergencies, right? You need money at the end of the day. So yes, we need to be passionate, but I can only hope that there is a way out of this financial mess. And I can only hope. Like one way could be like, see, all these Google and Facebook, basically they're selling, making money out of our content, right? Now in Australia and elsewhere, people have got, Rupert Murdoch have gone to court, and now these newspapers have to be given a cut by Facebook and Google and others in these social media giants. We should, but then we haven't. Like, I know there are organizations which have happened, like they have come together, but nobody has really pressured them to pay money to these organizations. Like you do a story sitting in Chennai, and whichever organization you work with, that story is picked up by Google, and Google is making money out of that story, and your organization is not getting anything, right? So I think this Australia model has shown us the way that they will have to share the spoils with us because they are getting it free, the content, and we are the content providers, which they are using. So they better pay us because this content does not come free. Journalism costs money. You will travel, your salary. So maybe that's one way out. And we will have to claim our share. But unfortunately in India, I know that there is an organization, people have come together, but they were discussing this, that also I know. But have they pursued the judiciary to the extent that they should have? I'm not too sure.
Okay, there.
So my name is Prithvi. I'm from Kerala. I'm a student of Asian College of Journalism. So we were talking about the traditional journalism as well as the digital journalism. I just wanted to ask you, what are the challenges we're going to face, the traditional journalism is going to face in spite of the digital journalism which is arising? And also, if there is a challenge, will there be an existential crisis, or how can we overcome this?
Traditional media, the biggest challenge that you will face, again, barring a few exceptions, barring a few exceptions, the space for practicing free and fearless journalism is getting restricted. Because as I said, owners are under pressure. They are vulnerable because owners are necessarily, they own other businesses as well. So they are vulnerable. So they are restricting this free space for practicing free journalism. That is one reason why you see most of the newspapers being playing very safe, not doing real investigative journalism, very straitjacket, playing it safe. That is, if you are in a traditional place, that is one reason, one problem that you will face. Unless you are with, say, possibly Hindu or Indian Express, because I still feel that they do very brave, solid journalism. And then I've lost, what was the second part of the question?
Sir,
Yes.
if there is an existential crisis, how can we overcome this?
Yeah, as I said, there is it's an existential crisis. I know of people like To be very honest, I have very bloody hands. I have taken people's jobs. I have sacked people. I've retrenched people rather, not sacked, retrenched. But then what do? Like you have to decide, like if, as it is, the entire organization is going down, drowning. Now then you decide like, okay, I sacrifice 30% and then I try and save 70%. It's something like your boat is drowning and you have 10 people on the boat and then you are told that, okay, you can throw 3 people off board and then in that case you can save the 7 people. I'll do that, right? I'll try and sacrifice 3 and save 7. And that's precisely what I did with Outlook. I sacked 30% of the staff, editorial staff, across my magazines, Outlook Traveler, Outlook Hindi, Outlook Money. I hated all of them because there was no money. So I had to take this hard call, like, okay, 30% I sacrifice. Very hard on them. I don't know. I sometimes shudder even now. I think of them. What happened to them? Did they survive? But then what do you do? What choices do I have? Otherwise, I would have gone down with all those 100 people. So I think I managed to save 70 by sacrificing 30. So we are facing an existential crisis. Like if you ask those people who lost their jobs, yes, we already are in an existential crisis. And this crisis is just not monetary. It's even in terms of ethics, free speech, how much of free journalism and fair journalism you can practice. As I told Mr. Paneerselvan, journalism in India is under siege. And we'll have to struggle, fight harder to hold our ground.
Ruben, we'll take one question from a person who's participating through Zoom. Subbu, will you just ask the person?
Good evening, sir. This is Mrunali from St. Joseph's University, Bangalore.
Right.
So you had mentioned of a turn that happened around 2014 that led to financial cuts in the industry, and Pani sir had also mentioned that it could be postponed by a few years. Could one of you elaborate on what that is?
That was Mr. Paneerselvan's point. Maybe he should elaborate because 2014 I was not even in India. So I think he should be better equipped to answer that. Paneer, you want to go with that?
I think we'll keep that part of the discussion later, because I think we'll stick to your book and your experiences at this stage. I can take one more question. Okay, there. Or I will take 2. There's Sandesh. Please. There.
Good evening, sir. My name is Shweta and I'm from Chennai. So my question is, earlier magazines used to mostly come out in a weekly or a fortnightly basis, but with the rise of digital platforms, there is a constant need to publish news immediately, instantly. So what is the challenge these magazines and editors especially face? Is there a special team for the digital instant news? And especially if there is a financial stress like you were mentioning in the Outlook magazine.
Yeah, so the challenge for a magazine editor would be that magazine is long form. So the content has to be really different and good. Like if I just rehash and give you in my magazine whatever you have read or seen on TV, of course you are not going to read my magazine. But if the stories that we do is to a different, it gives you a different angle, it tells you, gives you a different perspective, it has a wholly new twist, you will read. Like just the way you read my missing issue perhaps. And in my 3.5 years, I can cite so many other issues of Outlook, which did exceedingly well, because I remember like we did for the year-end issue 2018, we put the issue of menstruation as the issue of the year. And we had a fantastic painting on the cover with the title, I Bleed for Life. And it became a collector's issue. People still keep that issue. So because it was something, it was kind of breaking new territory, telling a story totally differently, which you normally don't get it in. See, it's not only good content, that content necessarily also has to be different. And that is what the challenge in journalism is. You will have to ideate. Your ideas have to be very smart and different. And I keep it. And coming back to digital, yes, because even the traditional media is now coming onto digital space because they realize that is where finally the advertisements are moving. So they need to get into that because they will finally have to make money out of digital, because print ads are drying up. And the fear is another few years, the print ads will dry up. So even Outlook is making a transition in the sense like we have a very strong digital footprint. And so you give breaking news, instant immediacy, topical immediacy. But where my belief was, in my opinion, but Outlook being Outlook, what is the strongest value? It's the different kind of in-depth content that we do, so that we should never sacrifice. So that remains our core. Our good journalism remains at the core, and we top it up, the icing on the cake, with breaking news and a little bit of entertainment, sports, Virat Kohli scoring a century or not scoring a century. So you draw in people, you get traffic, you get eyeballs, and then the people who come onto your site discovers your core journalism, and then they stay on. I think that's the right approach, the way to go about it.
Thank you, Ruben. We'll take one last question. We have exceeded by 10 minutes already. Okay, we'll take two more questions because Vijay Shankar also has a question. Go ahead with that question.
Hello, am I audible?
Just two questions with this. We'll take both the questions and we'll get his answer and wrap it up. Go ahead with your question.
Good evening, sir. I'm Saman Hussain from Asian College of Journalism. I have worked as an intern with Outlook for almost a year. I recently left. So whatever you've talked about, I have actually witnessed most of the things. So when I joined Outlook, I felt that
you were there. I was there when you joined.
Sir, you had just left when I joined.
I've just been sacked. Good for you.
Yes, then Chinky, Chinky ma'am had
No,
joined.
let's not take names.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I've realized like most of the things that you talked about, I could relate to it. But one of the changes that I saw in Outlook was changing from a political magazine to a cultural magazine. And since you have like worked with Outlook and you know Outlook inside out, what do you think? Was this move beneficial in your mind, and what could be the reasons for Outlook to do this?
Paneer, I would like to answer this, please, first.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll take a very short answer. I wouldn't like to discuss Outlook and the next editor. It's not my business. But so I'm not discussing Outlook, but I'm answering you. Okay. I was told before I was sacked, when the pressure was brought on me, that you can't do this kind of stories because they felt that they might cause us trouble, cause us grief, right? What is a safe thing to do under such in such situation? Write about sea beaches, forests, landscape, right? They don't cause you grief, right? Dance, write on films, write on sports. They are not politically going to cause you trouble. Has it answered you? Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Ruben, this is Vijay Shankar.
Yeah. Hi. Hi,
I
sir.
want to say one of your points. I want to endorse. I really love this presentation because as editor of Frontline for the past 20 years, I was the editor of Frontline till April 30th. So I have a similar experience, but I didn't face any interference. I just want to, that is, I'm in support of your view about traditional journalism, digital journalism. Our experience in Frontline in the last 2 years. See, after COVID, we had to go online. Before that, it was only free. It was free. Entire magazine was free online. And at the when the COVID thing started, we had to go online. We did print also, but we brought out a lot of issues, at least 5-6 issues, purely exclusively on COVID, different kinds of stories. Our experience is very interesting. In the last 2 years, the same period when the traditional media was facing a crisis, our digital media really did well, and we reached a subscription of about 60,000 in 2 years, 60,000 total.
Subscription.
60,000 subscriptions online. So when we did a survey, toward the end of my career, there was a survey. Two things stood out. The survey results showed two things. One is, what do you like in frontline? Traditional fact-based writing. Then alternative point of view. In support of your point, core journalism remains the same, whatever the technology. You can call it digital media, online, television. But finally, what you said is right. You write strong stories based on ideation is very important. That will never lose its currency. That's what our experience shows. So traditional and digital, there is no conflict actually. What you did in traditional, you have to do it in a better way. But to cover the latest, we introduced something called dispatches to cover the latest events every day. But actually, our readers really like the content, and all the stories were done by traditional, so-called traditional journalists. So that really helped us to take it forward. That is, take digital forward. So I am in support of what you said is right. As youngsters, I would say only that core of journalism remains the same. Whatever form it takes, whatever new forms or whatever new technology comes in. So remain committed. Yeah,
I agree with
that. Thank you.
Ruben, we would like to hear your concluding remarks before we close this session.
Who will give the concluding remarks?
No, we would like to hear your concluding remarks.
Okay. The editor is missing from action, but then that's not the end of the road for me. It's definitely, as I keep saying, it's a setback. Something very unpleasant and unfortunate happened. But have I given up on my convictions? No. Given a second chance, I'll do the same thing, because I remain essentially a journalist, and I will keep doing my journalism to the best of my ability, what the odds, irrespective of what the odds are. Difficult times, but this is also the time when we must show our character and hold our ground. And the future belongs to the young boys and girls out there, including the ones who are there. Be strong, be honest, and the rest of it will be taken care of. Life is a challenge, so fight it out, give it a good fight, spirited fight. And as long as you are honest and true to yourself, I would like to believe that finally victory will be ours. And I'm very hopeful. Journalism is going through a crisis, but there are very many young, bright journalists who are doing exceptionally, phenomenally good work, and journalism in India will survive. You might lock up a Siddiq Kappan here or send Zubair Mohammad in jail somewhere, but journalism is going to survive because there are very many young, committed journalists who are doing phenomenal work in India. And so I would like to end with that hopeful note. And I'm also not finished as a journalist yet.
See, we all recognize journalism matters for democracy. We all recognize the value of credible information. Trustworthy news is the one which helps us to make informed choices. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.